Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Ethical Hypothetical. I hope you're enjoying the series so far. If you would like to be a part of this show, if you have good internet, if you have a decent microphone, I have been getting a lot of emails and I haven't been able to reply to all of them. I do apologize, but now you can contact Alex. So Alex, what is your email?
Just contact me at aleks_mkovic@gmail.com. So that's just alex.mkovic@gmail.com. And I'll get back to you as soon as I can.
Beautiful. We'll put that in the description. We have got Rowan and Chris as our guests today. Tell us a little bit about yourselves. Let's start with Chris. Tell us about you.
I'm a nurse of 33 years. I've been mostly working in cardiology and intensive care. These days, I'm also working in the vaccination clinic for Pfizer clinic.
Damn. Is that really hectic right now?
At times. Yesterday, my first 4 hours was just like non-stop. In the early afternoon, there was virtually nobody there. So it was, very busy in the beginning and then sort of slowed down.
Interesting.
Fortunately, most of them were second vaccines yesterday. Very few first doses. So we must be getting somewhere.
Yeah, I saw mad lines out the front of all the vaccination clinics. I was like, yeah, people are doing that thing where it's like, oh, fuck, like getting their assignment in their last minute.
Mm-hmm.
I've got to get that first beer at the pub, right?
Yeah, dude.
Well, beautiful. And Rowan, tell us a little bit about you.
My name's Rowan. I'm a comedian and writer, and currently living in Newcastle at the moment. Yeah, that's kind of me.
Beautiful. All right. Well, Hara is going to take the lead on this one. So, Hara, take it away.
Okay, so I'm going to present 3 different scenarios, but I'll present the first scenario first, and then we can discuss about it, and then I'll bring the second scenario, and then the third, and so we discuss about each scenario separately. So it's a bit different from the previous videos. Okay, so you're a middle-class parent of 3 and has 3 children. You are a full-time tradie working 5 or 6 days a week for 10 hours per day. You pay your taxes regularly and accurately, which means that your children are not receiving the quality of life you would like them to have, as you're always worried about getting the bills paid first. Should you start doing some trade jobs in cash so that you don't have to declare them for tax? So, yeah. 3 kids, tradie, you work a lot and you pay your taxes, but you just can't provide anything extra to the kids.
What are we providing currently? What is their standard of living right now?
Public schooling, you don't live in a great area or suburb. You want to buy a house, but you can't afford buying a big enough house. So, there is the rent as well on top of all the other bills. The kids are growing and they can see that they are quite disadvantaged from, what happens on social media. They, haven't been on holidays or anything like that because you're always working.
How many extra hours do you have to work cash in hand jobs in your week?
It could be like, let's say the Saturday or 2 days a week, make it cash so that you don't have to declare it. So you'd still be paying some tax, but
Well, I imagine he's already paying a fair amount of tax on that volume of work. In that situation, to me, I don't see a problem because he is doing everything. He's meeting his obligations to society, and he's probably paying a hell of a lot more tax than most other people. Your big business people that have the ability to hide it.
I'm kind of with that as well, honestly. I reckon I think you've already fulfilled your social obligation of just paying tax. You're probably paying a fair amount of tax already. And I think it's just one of those things where it's like, we all do cash under the table jobs. You know what I mean? Like, just sit
If
around
you're
and ponder-
Balkan,
Hey,
yes.
the ATO's coming after you, bro. That's on film now.
Bro,
Rookie error.
it's just like, fuck, audit me, bro. Nah, dude, but for real, I think it makes a lot of sense, especially for people that maybe aren't don't have, like, again, it goes back to the thing, immigrant parents, all this, that maybe don't have the education in this country necessary to provide a better lifestyle. A lot of the time, I think cash jobs are the answer. And if you already are paying tax, if you already have that, if you're already a sole trader or whatever it is, you're already paying your tax. I don't think there's anything wrong with a couple $100 here and there just to provide a slightly better lifestyle for your family. I don't think that's an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? I can see both arguments, because if everyone just was lax with their tax obligation, well, then there wouldn't be any tax. But as Chris said, at least the stereotype is that, you know, big businesses and corporations virtually pay zero tax, and they hire the most shrewd accountants to get around all the rules and use the loopholes. And it's definitely not a fair and equitable tax system. And if it's for the advantage of your family, I would probably err on the side of looking past a few cash-in-hand jobs. Having said that, if he's also...
where do you draw the line, though?
Yeah, I know. That's the tough one. I would say, look, if he or she is also, you know, then spending a lot of money on the pokies, or has extra expenses that they could then cut back on to spend on their children, then no, then they shouldn't be doing the cash-in-hand jobs. But in this hypothetical situation, assuming they're doing everything they possibly can, they're a really hard worker, and they still can't provide. And it also depends, how if it's just that their children can't go on holidays. Well, I don't know if family holidays are a right. I think it should be. I think most families should have enough money to be able to take a holiday once a year, but I think basic rights are just your right to education, your right to healthcare, your right to a roof over your head and food on the table, these kind of things. If they're covered, then I would also say, no, he probably shouldn't be doing that. But if they are not covered, then I think I would turn the other cheek and say, okay, he's morally allowed to do that.
What do you think, Rowan?
I agree. I think there's probably a dollar amount cap, I would say, for me, like that if he was or she was earning a certain amount doing that, then that would be okay to a point. But I think after that, then there's probably a responsibility. I don't know how much that would be. Maybe if it was like an extra $20,000 annually, like that he or she was like adding up, then I would probably say that's maybe reasonable. I'm not sure. Maybe. But yeah, I think there's got to be some kind of limit. If it was sporadic, that's understandable, but if it's consistent cash in hand work, then maybe setting up an ABN. I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's one of those things where it's kind of ethically weird, because the issue is that all these people with a bunch of money don't pay their tax.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The people with all of the money don't pay their tax. And they just seem to get away with it.
Yeah.
And then someone who is struggling doesn't pay their tax, and it really comes down on them. And I feel like it's one of those things, given the scenario, if any of us were in it with like 3 kids, like in just not living a fantastic lifestyle, and you have this, everybody has that dream, like, I want to provide a nice life for my family. I think given that situation, we're all being like, dude, I'm taking a couple cash jobs.
Yeah, and also, for example, with other people that, before you talked about education, and for example, my grandparents not maybe being able to provide in other ways but tradie jobs, other people can get around the tax through, the investments or like the stocks. And so that's just their way of getting around it, because they're still providing service, they're still working. It's not that they are not, providing.
Well, yeah, that's another thing, is that like people in that scenario rarely have the connections to like understand how to invest properly. Like like the rules around that you can sort of work in your way. Like I don't think my parents have even ever thought about stocks.
Yeah, same.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas like I definitely know like some of my closest friends, their parents that grew up here, and like I think just growing up here, going through this education system sets you up in a way that you're just like, oh, and growing up with those people, I think you go, oh, I sort of know how I can make this work in my favor.
Exactly.
And that education isn't common. It's not available to everybody.
Yeah, it's I'd say it's also a class divide as well. I don't know if it's just an immigrant divide, because if you go if you're surrounded by middle class and upper middle class people, the conversation is going to gravitate towards things like investment portfolios and real estate. And if you are working class, having said that, in Australia, there are also a lot of working class people who have investment properties, and negative gearing has been a boon for many people who would in other countries not be able to have an investment portfolio. But then it's also a mechanism for people to game the system and have 5 investment properties and then have a salary of hundreds of thousands and virtually pay no tax, because they can just deduct all the hypothetical expenses. So there's no perfect situation. I think if we're talking just I would sort of make the connection there where if someone has a joint now and again, it's not a big deal. If someone does a few jobs cash in hand, yes, it's not a big deal. But ultimately, if you can afford it, and even if it's a flawed tax system, you should set a precedent and try and pay your fair share of tax, because even if it's true that billionaires and the wealthy are not paying their fair obligation and they're getting through the loopholes, you do need to set a precedent. And if everyone starts avoiding their tax obligation, well, then you can really divulge into a fiscal disaster there. So
and exactly. And if you think about it, like the people that are not paying as much tax because they have all these big corporations, they're providing to society in other ways by providing all these jobs and creating. So I guess everyone contributes to society in a different way. Hopefully. Cool. Should I go through the second scenario now?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're a parent of 3 again. You have a full-time job as a banker. You also have a few shares in the stock market, and you're about to buy your 3rd property for investment. Your state imposes 10% land tax on your additional properties, which means you are paying thousands of dollars more than someone in a different state with the same amount of properties. You think that's unfair? Should you declare the house, one of the houses, under your kid's name so that you avoid land tax?
No.
So
That's a pretty straight answer for me.
Yeah. No, that's
Very
pretty
easy.
shady.
Yeah, but if you think about it, so South Australia, compared to other states, we have like an extremely high land tax, for example. So a lot of people that have additional properties think it's completely unfair, because if they had the exact same amount of properties in Western Australia, they'll be paying way less money than in South Australia, for example.
But that's the trade-off for living in Western Australia. That's
To me, that comes as a choice. If it's investment, it's a choice.
Yeah, it's like the same thing with people like rent's cheaper in Queensland. It's like, yeah, because it's Queensland. Like, let's go. I'm from Queensland. I'm talking shit, but
I'm from Queensland also, so I'm in Queensland. I live in Brisbane.
I love Queensland.
I think that's the reason why people tend to, if they're going to buy multiple properties, look at buying in different states, because you avoid those kind of restrictions. Like you pay less tax because you've got one place in Queensland, one place in New South Wales, one place in Victoria.
You're playing real life Monopoly.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think that I agree with everyone that you shouldn't be able to put that on. You shouldn't put that on your kid's name just to avoid the tax. But I would be like, why are you buying a third one in New South Wales when maybe it's a better, like, there's opportunity to save if you can buy a similar place with a similar,
I think a lot of investors.
outcome.
Oh, sorry.
No,
I
you
think a
don't
lot
go
of
yourself.
people already do that. Like as in Brisbane, there's flights come up from Sydney and Melbourne to invest in properties up here because they are cheap, or have been. So yeah, and that then pushes our market up as well. Which, I thought, it's follow on.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say, I thought that's the whole point of the market is like, it's like here's expensive, so you sell here, you go buy somewhere where it's cheap until it's expensive there, and then you sell there, and that's the gambit. That's what I always thought.
Yeah, but all of that is, I mean, if you're putting it under your child's name, it's dishonest, and you're willfully lying. So that's, to me, where the ethics come into it.
You can argue that it could be your kid's house in the future, or because like where's the difference between that and the cash job that we were just talking about the previous person? Because that's dishonest. Because you know what I mean?
Fair point.
Like it seems like we are applying different principles.
I will say
for different people.
That's a fair point. I'll just say quickly to respond to that. Like I mentioned previously, when we're talking about the basic needs of a child, I would be willing to turn the other cheek when it comes to being dishonest on tax. When the child's basic needs are met, no, then I think you're then the dishonesty involved in unscrupulous tax conduct needs to be held under a microscope. And all of these are a fine balance, right? Because if governments hike up taxes too much, well, then, people either leave the state or move their business elsewhere or figure out a way to get around it. And also, if individuals and corporations believe that their tax dollars aren't being put to good use, which many people do believe now, well, then they're less incentivized to honestly pay tax. Whereas if you can see the adequate infrastructure, if you can see that your children are being educated properly at a public school, if you can see that the healthcare system is well funded and you're getting a good product, well, then, like with any other thing that you're paying for, you're going to pay the tax properly. But it's to an extent, it's a responsibility for the government to actually use those tax dollars effectively as well.
Yeah, it's different when we're talking about like trying to find a little extra money to get your kid a ticket to Dreamworld and buying them a house.
Yeah, and
it is some difference.
There's a lot of other tax. There's a lot of other tax evasion aspects or tax minimization associated with the investment house in the first place. So there's a negative gearing tax benefit. So he's already getting tax benefits by having investment properties in a negative gearing market. So avoiding to paying more tax, it's a balance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way. Like if everyone loses faith in the given economic system, people are less likely to, partake in it. They're trying to find loopholes. They're trying to figure out ways to circumnavigate it. Well, that itself is what causes the deterioration of the given system. Whereas if everyone just had faith that, hey, look, it is an imperfect system, but it's a reasonably good one. Let's just pay our fair share. If we are a corporation, sure, there are market pressures and we need to be competitive, but there's also just a civic duty that we have to the nation and to the populace wherein we need to pay our fair share. Well, then those taxes can then be put to good use and the infrastructure improves and the overall, hopefully, education level and general well-being of the population increases, which would then actually increase the bottom line because hopefully people are then have more disposable income and are able to move up to the middle class, especially when we're in this sort of global economy now. So if you have two look, you need to be skeptical of where your tax dollars are being used and always ask questions to the government. But if you completely lose faith and just have this nihilistic view of the world and the system, quote unquote, then that actually causes the further deterioration of that system. So I think you need to set a precedent as an individual and say, look, if we're dealing with like basic necessities of our children, okay, certain things, if they're not violent, I would say can be ethically forgiven. But if we're talking about the difference between a net worth of 2 million or 1.7 million, well, I think then you're being selfish. But
yeah, and a bit greedy
know.
as well. I think there is a sense of greediness.
Yeah.
But what about mo money, mo problems? Like, I feel like like let me put myself in the shoes of someone who is like, you know, can afford the idea of 3 investment properties. Like, they're probably paying a shit ton of tax. Like, they're probably paying what they feel like is an unfair amount, proportionate to the amount of value they generate for the economy, the, you know, whatever.
Well, if they manipulate the negative gearing laws, they may not be. In Australia, they can actually decrease their taxable income to a really substantial
Small
degree.
amount.
Yeah.
But land tax is outside of that.
Yeah,
That's
it's
more the
different.
personal
Sure, yeah.
level of wealth. I think that, yeah, I mean, I just feel like it's the thing where the more you earn, the more you get taxed, which is, you know, but the more, you know, the higher it becomes more, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, proportional, like the problem. And so, I don't know, like, maybe I think it all comes down to how you do it. If there is a legal way for you to minimize your tax, I think that should be okay. Like, if you're willing to, and the other thing is, like, I think we think about tax minimization as this like really simple, easy thing, whereas like it's pretty boring. Like, to sit in the weeds and like read through and think about your problems in multiple ways. Like, it's not like the government makes it easy for you to like not pay your taxes. Like, it's hard to justify and, you know the thing back to front. So there's almost like a reward in itself for actually, because most people aren't willing to do that kind of work, to go, no, this is how much I actually owe, and this is where I can save. But then also to like manipulate your life so that you can avoid tax is also like, it's a cost in itself. Like, you got to remember to pay with something, with a particular card or in a particular way, or a particular, you know, set of like, you know, at this part of the month, I can only spend this amount with this card or what. Like, there's a lot of like, to really like live in a very money conscious way where you're minimizing your costs. Like, it requires a lifestyle change that is, for us, like it's almost like, and so for me, there's a part of me that's like, well, if you're willing to do the work, if you're willing to you really don't want to pay your taxes, and you're willing to do it in a legal way, you know, go for it, you know, like.
Well, I think it's also the fact that it's not just tell me if I'm wrong, but like, I feel like it's not just the fact that most people aren't willing to do the work. I feel like most people don't even know that there's something that they can do.
Yeah.
Like, like that education isn't commonly available to people. It usually is to people that are probably a little bit more into the upper class, because they have those people around them. They're like, oh, you know, you can actually do this. But like a tradie, most of the time, like, instead of like, I mean, like, we got the barefoot investor. You know what I mean? But then that's just scratching the surface.
There's some gold in the barefoot investor. I don't know if you've read the barefoot investor.
Anyone can self-teach. I think there's if you want to, there's the education there available for you.
So,
but it's so difficult to access. Like, what actually works, what doesn't. You know.
But like, I think you just, like, we have Google, right? You Google, how do I pay less tax? Like, just like, if you were like, I think most working class people have Google. I would say, and
I would say as well, yeah,
and have the ability to receive, you know, SEO optimized advertising from their local IPT tax consultant or whatever, you know, and you hop on their website and you can see like we can help you like there's a service that offers you to look at your books and give you options for minimizing your tax. And like, I know to see an accountant to do that, you can you can actually get that money that you spent on the tax accountant, you can get that off your taxes. So, but you need to go and see someone who's done the work, who knows the thing, and can apply those principles and those legal loopholes to your.
Can you?
Okay, can I
actually?
jump,
That's it.
Can I
No,
just
you go, Neil,
jump
yeah.
in there real quick? What is the opportunity cost of saving that extra, whatever it may be, 2, 3, 4, 5, even 10% of your income, and not paying it as tax? Because where does it? To me, the question then is like, all right, what do you then do with that extra disposable income? Do you then invest it? Do you then just purchase luxury items, which is then just like going to the bottom line of corporations anyway? So in the sense, I agree people should be financially literate and understand the tax code as best as they can. And to some degree, people can be rewarded for that. But there's also, to me, it's a sort of cultural issue where people are basically competing with their own government because they've lost faith in where those tax dollars are going. And if you've lost faith in the actual, public services, well, that's an issue that the government needs to address, so that we shouldn't be in a country where people are sort of like pedantically looking at how they can save an extra $70 here and there. Because, okay, I'm a middle class person. If I have faith that $70 is not going to go into the pockets of corrupt politicians, that $70 is going to go to building good roads. And then I think we can avoid this culture where everyone's just obsessed with trying to minimize their tax burden as much as possible.
That's a really good point.
Also, that's a great point. But also, can I ask a question? Has anyone actually can you just go to an accountant and ask, how do I pay less tax?
Yeah.
Will they tell you?
Yeah.
And then they'll ask for a lot of money as well, though. That's the trade-off.
Okay, right. Okay, sweet. Because I was just like, oh yeah, I've never asked that. Maybe that's it, bro. I just blew my own mind.
You got to look at what you're earning relative to how much they're gonna pay, though, because they'll charge a fair bit.
Yeah,
and then
totally.
If you're earning a lot of money, yeah, it's totally worth it. But like if you're a sole trader on a reasonably modest income, you might have to even ask, all right, relative to how much I'm going to pay this accountant,
is it worth it?
in terms of how much they're going to
worth
save
it?
me, is it actually worth it?
Yeah.
Well, you can look at that in the short term or the long term, right? Like, and I think there's probably arguments to be made on both the immediate costs, which are, maybe it's a couple of dollars here and there, but a couple of dollars here and there over 20, 30 years, like, what is that? Like,
True.
And then you that's money that you could chuck into, whether it's like a high saving account or, something that like helps kind of quote unquote make your money work for you. I don't know, like, or is that something that you top your super up with? I don't know.
Rowan's gonna have the most money out of all of us. That's what I'm getting from this, dude.
No.
We're gonna see him in a year.
Sorry,
and he's like, "Is that a new gold chain?"
I think also
Doesn't depreciate, bro.
but to your point, Neil, like, on how much you should like be spending, that's up to you, right? And I think going back to the thing of like, well, I'm a tradie who's trying to give my kids more, and you assuming that money is the thing that's going to help them live a better life. Like, how do you know that the time spent earning that cash in hand job isn't going to be better off spent building relationship with your kid? Like,
Absolutely, yeah.
And so that's totally fair. Like to question that, and everyone's going to have a different answer. But yeah, I don't know if I think Australians always value our lifestyle. Like, to us, being rich is more about lifestyle than it is about income. Sometimes, like, there's a lot of people that I like live around here in Newcastle with who their annual income isn't huge, but they live a quality of lifestyle that people who I think are earning maybe $50,000 more in Sydney almost wish they had, or would be willing to trade that incremental income for.
there's a number, right? There's a number where it's like once you reach this annual income, your quality of life actually doesn't go up.
Yeah, I think it's 110,000.
Right.
Yeah, around
Oh,
yeah, that's a lot of
100,000.
money.
Yeah, that's higher than I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, for like
Wow,
yeah, but it's still
makes sense.
Yeah, but it does make sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
It's like I guess one last point is like it's interesting to think about, how much can this extra money I've been able to save by looking at all the ways I can lower my taxable income. How will that money work for me versus thinking in a more communicative way and saying, well, how is this money going to work for the country, for the community? And I think that may be a cultural shift that could be worthwhile if people. But again, it does look, because there's corrupt actors in both situations. There are politicians who are going to try and take a lot of that money for themselves, but then at the same time, you can give it to a bank and you can invest in shares. You don't, you're so detached from the CEOs and the people who are actually going to, that you're trusting to do the right thing with that money, and you don't know exactly. You're just sort of trusting that the shares will increase in value, which they historically do at a pretty substantial rate, but you don't know about the exact ethical behavior that's being undertaken and all sorts of things. So I think it's just more complex than just how do we maximize our
Would you
tax
be
burden.
up for a system where you can opt into what your tax goes to?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think you should
That'd
be.
be
Like, there's
so
no reason.
democratic.
Isn't that what we?
Yeah.
But isn't that why we watch the budget? Isn't that why the ABC has the budget every year and why we vote? Like, aren't we?
Why do we
Are you
need to
talking
vote?
about?
Why not just
Why-
have when when it's tax time, you can say, all right, this is your tax burden, and say you owe the government 25 grand in tax. You can say I want
Yeah.
5 grand to education, 5 grand to defense, and then
Or
maybe like a certain
percentages,
percentage of
yeah.
that can just go to a general pool where it'll go to things that most people aren't ticking, like politician salaries, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
But I don't think we have the technology to do something like that. It's just that the people who have the power to implement that are going to lose a lot of power by implementing that, so they're not
Yeah.
going to do it.
Yeah, it sounds like a good idea, but I don't think it would. I don't feel it could work in a practical sense because there are things that are you're going to find some people say, well, I don't want to give to I'll say Indigenous assistance groups. I'm not going to give to that, or I mean. That was just the first one that came to mind, but there would be things. That
The military.
probably wouldn't end up. Yeah, the military. Like,
It would be too easy to troll. It would be too. You could just start a 4chan group where it's like, boys, this year give all your money to EB Games.
Yeah, it's true.
Like, whatever the fuck. Like, it would be too easy to troll.
Yeah, true.
But that's where
Anytime
if
you
there's
leave
a
it up to the
general-
public, they fuck it up.
Yeah, there does need to be
That's
some
true.
coordination.
That's
Look at the Bodie McBoatface thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're like, name our new boat. And everyone went, obviously Bodie McBoatface, dude.
Then again, politicians aren't exactly, they're also fucking things
No.
up too. So
Yeah, no,
there's a
of
bit
course.
of both. Bit of both, maybe. Like, what if 50% of your tax goes to just the treasurer can decide where that goes, and then the other 50% you get to
Yeah.
decide. What about that?
I like that.
I think but also like government is just famously inefficient. Like as a business, like the way that they work, and I've worked with like business, like I've worked in agencies that have worked with businesses, like government agencies before, and it's crazy how much money they have. And how slowly things go, and like that sounds like a stereotype. I don't. It's not a new take, but
I've
it's
dealt with
like...
the ABC. I'm well aware.
Exactly, and I think that there's something to be said about it's just such a massive beast as a organization, and it just chews up so much cash. Like,
Yeah.
and man, I probably sound like a raging capitalist right now because I'm like, tax minimization and let's privatize the government. But I think it's like there is like, even if you get to choose where it goes, like, I think you don't have a choice over the efficiencies in which the programs that you're giving money to operate. So how effective is the ability to actually choose anyway, if that makes sense.
But that doesn't mean you should take away the choice.
Yeah.
Because like, oh, it still could be inefficient. It would still be nice. I'll tell you what's better than
It's
having.
just for you to sleep better at night. So you're like, oh, I gave my money to this.
Well, no, it's just like it's still good to just have a choice, even if it's always going to be inefficient. You know what I mean? So you may as well choose where it's going to be inefficient.
Yeah, because for example,
that's how I look at it.
Because we keep seeing like, I would rather, you know, how the fund a lot of the times like the money for the military, for example, the defense, it keeps increasing the budget for, you know, especially now with the deals with what's happening with the US and the UK, our defense spending will increase even more. Whereas, you know, that money could be easily spent in schools and hospitals, things that, you know, the general public is more interested, I think, in investing on. So having that choice would give the public the ability to, you know, pick their priorities rather than the defense. Doesn't directly affect us.
Can I ask?
I'd rather not spend my tax on.
Oh yeah, go on, Chris.
I'd rather not spend my tax on the military.
Exactly.
Yeah, just so they can get mech suits or whatever the fuck is next. Like,
I know.
But
we built Gundams.
I feel like giving to the military. Sorry, I'm just gonna. This is not. Oh man, I'm gonna sound bad. But I feel like giving to
here we go.
Giving to the military is like the least I could do in serving my country. Like in terms of like, sorry, not serving my country, but like I would never go to war.
Your life.
I would never. No, I'm sorry, but like I would rather pay for someone to do that than for me to
Rowan.
Like,
Rowan, where is
wants to Uber Eats the military? That's how.
Rowan, where's your Southern Cross tattoo?
I know.
You're from Newcastle as well.
But does that make sense? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I'm kind of with you. I think it's just about the excessive spending. You know what I mean? It's
sure.
like obviously we're all like, okay, yeah, money needs to go to the military.
I'm not going to pretend I know what excessive looks like. I have no clue.
And so
if it was up to me,
I work with people. The thing is that I work with, like you said before, I work with clients that are connected to the government, and so like with insurances and the area that I work in, I see where some of the funding goes, and it's ridiculous. Like what the government, you know, gets charged just for being the government. Even like in hospitals, like if you have a DVA claim versus a Medicare claim, just because you're a DVA, which means Department of Veteran Affairs, the GPs will charge double. That's just one example.
Well,
just for being DVA, just for that, it's the same service.
The most recent example? Sorry, just real quick.
Yeah,
the most recent example of the military thing. Do we need nukes?
No.
You know what I mean? That's what. Oh,
Not really.
Rowan's like. But think about how much a nuke is, dude.
Well, it's
but think of
strictly
China.
it's not nukes, it's nuclear powered. See, the thing with military
my bad.
spending
Well, I retract everything I said.
Is like, all right, yeah, a lot of it seems excessive, but you don't ever want to be in a situation 30 years
Where you
down the
don't
track
have it.
where you're like, oh shit, we should have spent more. If we'd spent
Right.
more on the military,
So it's like
we wouldn't
leaving the
have
house
been
without sunscreen.
overtaken, you know. So I'd err on the side of caution with military spending. Having said that, there's clearly a lot of corruption, and I wouldn't say strict corruption, but just people who are out to enrich themselves in all areas of business and government. And as Hara was just saying, you know, there's clearly these exorbitant costs, and government programs aren't subject to free market pressures, and that's why they may not be as efficient. But there's also a limit to how much you can just look at efficiency as a metric to determine how effective a program is. So say something like public health. Okay, maybe it's not as efficient as a private healthcare system, but the social cost of having a private healthcare system, if some people miss out, to me, is worth the loss of efficiency there, even if it does mean some extra tax burden on the individual. So What do you think about that, Rowan? Do you think there's ever a time where, you know, you don't efficiency is not the only metric to look at a government program?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. And sorry, I think I'm probably just being a little bit contrarian, or trying to throw a different
good,
viewpoint
though.
in purely to
Yeah.
purely to spark discussion. But because absolutely, like, the quote unquote efficiencies or reaching certain KPIs of a particular program aren't always the be all and end all, particularly if they're financial in nature, or and you know, particularly in more socially skewed programs, to do with the community and things like that. Like, it's really hard to put solid metrics around what good looks like. And I think that sometimes it's just having the program exist that is a good thing, you know.
Yeah.
To answer your question, Neil, I think efficiency is not always the main metric. Sometimes having the program just exist is the best thing for the community. But yeah, for more process driven stuff that's like purely how do we service people better, more efficiently, like, I mean, a great example is the user experience on, I don't know if anyone's ever tried to change their driver's license, their address on their driver's license, but the New South Wales app is amazing. I actually was at tried to get on to an RSL on my birthday this year, and I hadn't changed, and it was when Sydney went into lockdown, and I hadn't changed my address, and so on my driver's license it still had a Sydney address, and up here in Newcastle I couldn't get in because Sydney had gone into lockdown and they weren't accepting anyone from Sydney. And
Right.
so, but I had lived here in Newcastle for over a year and a half, and so I changed my address in the app on my phone, on the New South Wales or the driver's license app or whatever. And a week later in the mail, I had a sticker with my new address mailed to me that I could just slap on the back of my license, and until I get a new one. And I think I didn't have to ask for that. I didn't do anything. It just automatically sent that through. And I think those are the kind of like process efficiencies I'm talking about, where it's cool when the government gets that right, and creates these interesting experiences. And even MyGov is a good step forward as like a whole of system database where my ATO and my Medicare and everything is like all linked. And so in those kind of programs, I think efficiencies are important. But if we're talking about community stuff where we're trying to organize, you know, whether it's Indigenous, whether it's domestic violence, or, you know, trying to reduce these kind of social issues that we suffer with in our society, then you can't use the same metrics. It's got to be very different.
Yeah, I mean, you still want to be able to be efficient in trying to cure certain social ills in society, but if efficiency is the be-all and end-all, there will be social costs to that. I can't see how there wouldn't be social consequences to that.
Yeah, I think efficiency in the hospital system would be a good example. You know, we're run down to the bare minimum staff because the hospital's not making enough money. So the ratio of you have to put in a lot more effort to get your work done, and to do it in a safe, professional way. It's becomes more and more difficult. The more you try and make it these financial efficiencies without any practical backup, the service suffers, and the people don't get the treatment that they need. And I have, 25 years in government and the last 7 in private. I cancelled my private health insurance when I started working there. It's not worth the extra money. I wish the DVA guys would go to the public sector, because I think they would get a more holistic treatment and it would cost the government less. I never worked with a DVA patient in the public sector because Gold Card puts them all tells them to go private. Doesn't tell them to go where the best service is.
Whoa.
Yeah. I don't know a lot about the healthcare system, but I hear stories like that, and it's sort of this weird middle ground where they're trying to cut. They're talking about making processes efficient, but in doing so, as Chris said, it's just making the staff work more hours, and then what is the social cost to that? And then if nurses and doctors are overwhelmed, then they can't work as efficiently as they possibly can. If they're working 12 hours, it's 14 hours shifts, and then on 4 hours sleep. I was seeing a nurse for a while, and the poor woman, she had to wake up one day at like bloody 2 a.m. and then the next day it's like a completely different shift. And I was like, how can this be efficient? To me, the most obvious thing would be like, all right, you're the night shift person or you're the day shift person. And then that way people can plan their life around that and provide a better nursing experience. But Chris, tell me if I'm getting it wrong there, but some of the shift work that nurses have to endure seems inefficient. Actually, I can't see how that's conducive to good performance.
Yeah, it's like I worked 8 hours in the vaccination clinic. I'm working 12 and a half hours in the hospital tonight. So,
Wow.
I mean, that's two separate employers, but that's normal for us.
Well, yeah.
That's why melatonin gummies are up.
Yeah, of course. Hara, did you have any further situations with this question, or were they the?
I did, actually.
Okay.
It's up to you if you want to continue discussing, or we can leave that one. It's up to you.
Well, how about one final one that we can discuss for, say, 5 to 10 minutes?
Yeah, I only have one.
Okay.
And it's, yeah. Okay, so you're a parent of 3. You're a politician in your country. You come from a wealthy family that owns many hectares of farmland and several mansions around your country. You believe it's unfair to pay 40% tax on your wealth just because you're a politician. I just made up the percentage, by the way. Just because you're a politician. So you decide to invest the money on resorts overseas, saving yourself $200,000 per year. Should you have to declare your private assets to the public?
Yeah.
This one was based on the Pandora papers that has recently been discovered, with all these politicians and celebrities having all these assets. Everything was legal, but is it moral? Is it right?
No,
of course. I
can't
so. See why you. Yeah, I can't see why you shouldn't have to declare. Be fully transparent with your portfolio and your extra sources of income if you're serving the country. I can't.
But if it's private, if your grandparents used to own all these farmlands and you are rich because your parents were rich, not because the public money made you rich, kind of thing, do you still need to declare?
Well, declaring it is different to people than taking it away from you. But yeah, I think why shouldn't you declare it?
If some of the decision,
I disagree. I don't think you should have to. And I think some should celebrities who have social influence and the ability to, rally groups of people to a particular issue, like, should they have to? Is like influence? Does influence mean transparency? And because how do you keep your private life separate from your personal life? And I think with politicians, that's obviously blurred. I think unless there's something that's you're clearly making decisions based on a financial benefit, like insider trading, for example, I disagree with that. But if it doesn't affect, if you're not making any decisions in relation to that, then you shouldn't have to. I don't think you should have to declare.
But wouldn't you say the difference between a politician and a celebrity is that they're representing their constituents, and they're these separate assets, maybe providing a source of income different to their public income, but because they are being paid by taxpayers, I think it's fair for the people who are paying them to ask for an appropriate level of transparency.
Yeah, I think I'm not saying no to complete. Oh, sorry, maybe I'm backtracking here, but I'm not saying like completely no, like completely walled off.
Yeah.
Particularly if there, but like I would want like some kind of scaling system.
Sure.
I don't think I'm like, I think that's all I'm saying is like I wouldn't be like, nah, you need to declare every single thing that you've got, because I think that would be, I think that'd be, I don't know, I don't know.
I think it has to do with like how will then your policies be affected by, you know, the connections you have in your private life. And let's say, you know, if you have a farmland, for example, and you know, with Jordan, how he was talking about the water scandal, and you know how, you know, who you choose, you know, to do business with. Like, I think if it's affecting a public sector as well, then you should definitely, the public needs to be aware. But if you have a house like in Bondi and has nothing to do with any tax, like no lobbies, nothing, like it's just your holiday house or something, then the public doesn't need to know, as long as you pay your taxes and whatever.
Yeah, they don't need to know, but
Even
it's
if
a principle, isn't it? It's just, look, these are just, look, here you go, like, here's my assets. I want to represent you and make decisions on behalf of you.
Yeah, so if you want someone that you trust, is what you're saying, why wouldn't you? If you want people to trust you, because you're the leader of the country,
right?
I'm assuming, or
That's
one of
how
the
I-
leaders of the country. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why are you hiding shit? Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, it's that
Some of the politicians, yeah.
I said the perception of trust. If you know, if you people need to trust that they're the people making the decisions and the allocating of the public money, that they're not doing it to benefit themselves in some way. So it may not be apparent but a slight law change here has quite a big impact on something over here. And so if you're making a law that affects the value of your asset or the value of a relative asset, then I think people do need to know that could be an influencing factor in the way that you're making your decisions. I don't know. But that's why I kind of agree. I mean, I think they should declare it, particularly if it is that's something that can have the perception that you are voting for your own benefit or the benefit of your friends, say.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of the politicians that were caught in it, they were saying, are you aware of what I'm referring to?
Pandora Papers.
The Pandora Papers?
Yeah, sorry, I was sort of thinking more about Bruz. I had Bruz in my head when we started talking about this. I'm not aware of all the details, but them saying it's not illegal. Well, I agree. Maybe it's not illegal, but why is the law set so that they can do this? So why? It's not morally.
They made
right.
it legal so they can do it, literally. Yeah, and some of them were saying, well, the reason why it's not declared is because for privacy reasons, and like we don't want to know where, you know, we don't want the public to know where we stay when we go to like Panama or something. Fair enough. Like I understand that point of view, but yeah, I don't know. I had very mixed feelings about it.
I'm a socialist from way back.
I think I totally agree with this level of trust and wanting to be, you know, if you're someone who is in charge of making decisions on behalf of the public, you know, you want to make sure you have a clear conscience, and you're not doing anything that is putting your interests ahead of the people that you serve. It's hard. So is it wrong then if someone was to make a decision that both serves the people and themselves?
No, but if you're transparent about it, so if you say, okay, look, I've got this farm out rurally or whatever, and look, here's a policy I'm enacting that is going to increase the demand for whatever product. It's just a total neutral byproduct. I want everyone to know that, yes, I may benefit financially from this, but this isn't the reason I'm doing it. I think it's a good policy. I think if politicians were just honest and upfront about that, at least I personally would then think, okay, I have no reason to doubt them here. But when they hide all these things and sort of hide the benefits that they may be getting, then it seems really dodgy. I think there's nothing. It's not like I'm expecting politicians have to give up their assets or, allow their assets to then be state controlled or something like that. It's just about declaring what your asset portfolio is. I think that I don't think that's a big ask.
Yeah. Cool. I think, do we have any final closing statements?
Pay your reasonable amount of tax. Don't, as
Yeah.
Arnold
Yeah.
Arnold Schwarzenegger. Don't be a girly man. Pay your taxes.
We don't
Unless
want
you're
rich
kidding,
people.
can't eat.
Go see an accountant.
We
To
don't
be
want
fair,
rich people to
Australia
pay for
is
everything,
like,
just something.
The convicts that were sent here were like stealing a loaf of bread to feed their family. So there is there's a history there of going against authority. So, all right. Well, we leave that one there. Rowan and Chris, do you have any socials that you'd like to spruik?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, you go.
Actually, well, no, I don't really have any at the moment, so I'll let you go, Rowan.
Cool. I'm on Instagram at Rowan Thambar _. Yes, check it out.
Sweet.
Sweet as.
Yeah.
Cool.
Very
Thanks,
funny,
guys.
man. Go check him out.
Cool.
And Haro won a bodybuilding competition last nearly 2 weeks ago by the time
That's
this goes
awesome.
out.
Congratulations.
No, a week ago. It was 7 days ago.
But by the time this episode goes out, it will be nearly 2 weeks.
Yes.
So congratulations,
Okay,
Haro.
true.
All right, we'll see you.
Thank you.
See you guys
Thanks,
next
Neil.
time.
Thanks, guys.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Bye.